You're taking a look inside Kansas politics. Welcome in. I'm Rebecca Chung. Today we're talking about Kansas elections. Kansas Secretary of State Scott Schwab is joining me today, and we're talking about the latest on the upcoming primary and what's to come. Okay. So Secretary Schwab, let's start with the presidential preference primary. It's set for March 19th, but we have some important deadlines coming up just this month, right?
Correct, yes. So Tuesday the 20th is normally we have further deadlines between elections, but this is a new election. We don't normally vote in March or have elections in March, but Tuesday the 20th is going to be voter registration deadline and to fill out your application for an advanced mail ballot. So normally those two deadlines aren't on the same day, but they are this time, so we're encouraging folks, you can go to votekansas.gov, our website, to find these new deadlines, but that's a pretty important one, Tuesday. And then Wednesday the 28th is actually when advanced voting starts. Normally advanced voting starts right after the voter registration deadline. This time it's 8 days later.
All right. And keep in mind, we have 8 candidates listed on the ballot for the race. So the Republican primary candidates, that includes Donald J. Trump, Nikki R. Haley, Ron DeSantis, and Ryan Binkley. That's a Texas businessman and pastor. Then on the Democratic side, we have President Joe Biden, author and speaker Marianne Williamson, U.S. Representative for Minnesota Dean Phillips, and entrepreneur Jason Michael Palmer. So a lot goes into preparing for something like this, not just on the state's end, but also for local officials. So what's it been like prepping for this primary, and what sort of information is relayed to local election officials to make sure they're prepared?
So normally when we come into an election cycle, we create what's called the calendar, where you start with election day and you start working backwards on deadlines, and you fill in, okay, so then when do we need requests for things to go to the printer? When do we need to make sure our equipment is programmed? When do we have to do our various testing on equipment before the party's involved? And so they just have to move faster. I mean, our clerks just wrapped up their fiscal papers and property taxes notices that were going out late last year. And all of a sudden, they also finished the local elections of last year. Now it's just like, okay, now game back on. You got to quick turnaround and do it again. Many of our clerks are used to that because if you remember, probably 15, 20 years ago, we used to have spring elections kind of closer to this time of year, but the legislature moved them to August and November. So it's every August there's an election, every November, just to kind of get people in that programming mindset. But then they throw this wrinkle in there. So our clerks will do it. They always do. They do a fantastic job serving their neighbors. So.
Okay. Now, will there be an audit after this election? I understand that's kind of the process for normal ones, but what's it like for local election officials prepping for this primary, then getting ready for the presidential election in November? Right.
So this is really confusing because everything we normally do in election we'll do for this one. So you vote like in the normal places you vote usually. You can still do an advanced mail ballot. Now there is no 3-day grace period. The legislature didn't include that in this election, but the state board of canvassers still meet, and so it's going to feel like a normal election going forward. But it's just odd because we could end up electing somebody who's no longer even in the race anymore because DeSantis is on there, but he's dropped out. So that's why we call it a presidential preference primary, because normally when you say primary, if I win a primary in August, my name's on the ballot in November. This one, that may not be the case.
Okay. What are you expecting then as far as turnout for this particular primary, and how many people have registered so far?
So we don't have those numbers yet.
Gotcha.
We always get those numbers a couple days after the voter registration deadline because we're still, as voters are still applying. And one thing I want to add on that, if you're going to be 18 in March to vote in this thing, but you're not 18 yet, go ahead and register to vote. That way you can participate. We always try to remind folks, you don't have to be 18 to register to vote if you're going to be 18 by election day. But yeah, we won't have those numbers compiled till after all the counties report to us how many new voter registrants they have, and then we can kind of do an analysis about what voter turnout is. And it's an educated guess. With the value of them both amendment, we were off by miles, and it's just sometimes you can't predict.
Okay. What are some key things that voters should keep in mind or bring with them when they head to the polls?
Well, know if your candidate is still running. If that may be important to you. Now, if you're supporting someone who's dropped out of the race but you still want to, that's absolutely your right. But be aware. Follow up on the news that okay, this person's on the ballot, but they they're no longer in the race, then you might want to rethink about who you're going to vote for. And then it will be quick. Normally we have several contests in an election. You know, we have judge retention and, you know, legislature and Congress. This is just a presidential preference primary. You go in, you vote for your candidate, you're done. If you're an unaffiliated voter, you do have to declare a party to participate in this.
Well, Secretary Schwab, thank you. And please remember, there is a link where you can find election information, more information about the presidential preference primary on March 19th and other elections coming up later this year. So just go to sos.ks.gov. And we're also going to be talking about the top election priorities at the State House this year. That's when we come back. You're watching Inside Kansas Politics.
The 27 News Storm Tracker is sponsored by D.L. Smith Electric, bringing your vision to life.
Normal. We're all trying to get back to it together. But what if there were a new normal? One where everyone recognized how much we need everyone else and how much we need everyone to be healthy. At Grace Med, that's our hope. That's why we provide a medical home in 16 locations with a wide range of healthcare services for everyone, regardless of their ability to pay. It's also why we deliver care when and where it's needed most. Because we're Grace Med, the home of hope care for everyone.
It just keeps getting worse.
These are telltale signs that water is shifting your foundation. But it's okay. We got it.
Oh, this is done growing in this house.
Okay.
Cracking drywall is just one sign your foundation is compromised, but you can. Put water back in its place with a free inspection from Foundation Recovery Systems. For a limited time, get $500 off any repairs when you call or go online today.
The stories you need to know.
They just ripped the ATM out of the wall.
The stories that change the way you think.
Were you trying to rip me off?
It's one big party.
Inside Edition.
These are the stories that impact your life.
Weekdays at 2 on 27 KSNT.
Welcome back to Inside Kansas Politics. I'm Rebecca Chung, and we're back with Kansas Secretary of State Scott Schwab. Now, Secretary Schwab, let's talk about legislative priorities. There's 3 targets listed in your agenda for 2024, so let's take a look. We have modernizing the regulation-making process, business filing improvements, and updating publication statutes. Let's start with modernizing the regulation-making process.
Yeah.
So where do things stand currently with the state's process, and what are you pushing for at the State House?
So what we do is everything's paper shuffled, and you're not going from one office to the other. You're going from a building to a completely different building as it relates to updating regulations as it relates to ag, health, whatever. And so what we want to do is try to do more of a electronic transmission, but the statute says you got to use paper. So, and there'll be a small fee for a small cost to the state, and we're trying to partner with the Department of Administration on that so that we can. That's a one-time cost that'll save money long term. Because when you're shuffling papers, if you can literally lose one walking across the street in the building, and they're normally just. Sometimes interns carrying these things over and delivering. So we want to be able to do that electronically. And then as it relates to some of our other publications, when we publish regulations, by the time they're published, they're already outdated. So everybody uses the ones online. So our goal is to we're not going to put them on paper, they're online. And then if you want to publish one, we can get some published, but we're just trying to eliminate those. And then also with some statutes annotated. We deliver them to legislators every year. And when we deliver them, the box from the previous year is still sitting in their office unopened, so they really don't need them. So it's just little things like that to try to eliminate the use of paper, especially if it's not helping anybody.
Okay. Business filing improvements next on the list.
Yeah, so a few years ago, we're on a new computer system as of the 22nd of January, and we've moved from every filing being every year to every other year. So if you originated your business on an even year, now you just pay double the fee, but you'll just do your paperwork every even year, odd year, you'll do it every odd year. And that way, just trying to eliminate some of the administrative burden on small business.
Okay, and unnecessary filing requirements too, eliminating
Yeah,
those.
just a little bit of cleanup. There's some certain things that people ask to file, like on ag, like who all owns the land and foreign entities. Well, that's always filed with other administrations, and nobody's asked for that report since 1992. So if we can just get rid of it, it saves attorneys a lot of work, so much work, and they're charging the client to do it, so it saves the business in the end.
Okay, and then last but not least, updating publication statute. So what's behind this push?
So it goes back to the other thing, is just so many things we have to publish in paper that people are not asking requirements of. And we have warehouses of books that have never been opened that just end up being deteriorated. So anything we can do to kind of eliminate that, I mean, it's just something about a book being deteriorated just doesn't feel good in my soul. So if we don't have to print a book we don't want to print books that are never going to be used.
Okay. Now, also outside of the bills that your office has proposed, are there any others that you're hoping lawmakers take up this year, or some that you're working on?
Things we're working on, most of them is try to kill bills. We are big advocates of no drastic changes during major election years because it just causes confusion and it increases errors, variance, and waste in the counties. So we try to keep it consistent, but legislators have a right to try to come up with a law, and sometimes we still have some legislators that are really concerned about voter fraud in the state, especially in a presidential election, which I don't know why you would in Kansas, because we're not the target if you're going to try to commit voter fraud in a presidential election. So we try to kind of have those conversations to prevent those bad ideas from getting passed. And then we partnered with the Attorney General's office. We're being sued by the League of Women Voters and a few others that says, hey, if you act like you're a poll worker or an election official or the Secretary of State, which why would anybody want to act like this? It's a crime. Well, it was a last-minute amendment brought by a state senator that's not even serving anymore. So we want to tweak the language that both parties agree with so that we can dismiss the lawsuit and then not have to pay in a loss.
All right, Secretary Schwab, thank you so much.
Sure.
We're going to continue our conversation after the break. You're watching Inside Kansas Politics.
Hi, I'm Bob Goodall from Kansas Furniture Mart.
Queen Pillow Top mattresses, $233. 8-piece living room groups, $888.
Financing for everyone at the original Kansas Furniture Mart.
Mouth-watering, enticing, satisfying. Taco Villa. Since 1973, Taco Villa has been serving up their own style of delectable Mexican food. From the thing, to the nacho platter, to the low-carb salad, and everything in between. Taco Villa satisfies. Take it to the next level and smother anything in our famous signature chili con queso. Get your fix. Dine in, carry out, or call ahead with your order. Taco Villa on 21st next to the toy store.
Car accident? Devon James wins.
The real beauty of Kansas lies in the strength of its people. Hardworking, determined, resilient.
But sometimes, even the best of us can use a little help.
As attorneys, we have the privilege of being your advocate when you need help the most.
Because what matters to you matters to us. And that's why if you've been injured, Devon James wins.
Anywhere in the state, dial 8. Call 888-8888.
Would you rather hear about sports from people who like to talk sports, or hear from the people who actually play and coach sports?
The best predictor of future success is past success.
K-Nation has the interviews and coverage you want for all things KU and K-State.
When you do the small things correctly, big things will happen.
Join us every Sunday night after 27 News at 10 for another exciting week of K-Nation. Sponsored by 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline.
Hi, I'm Bob Goodall from Kansas Furniture Mart.
Queen Pillow Top mattresses, $233. 8-piece living room groups, $888.
Financing for everyone at the original Kansas Furniture Mart.
Welcome back to Inside Kansas Politics. I'm Rebecca Chung. Continuing our conversation now with Kansas Secretary of State Scott Schwab. Now, Secretary Schwab, let's talk about one of the big items in front of SCOTUS right now. So the Supreme Court is looking at whether Trump is able to remain on the ballot. That's after Colorado kicked him off the ballot in their state. And you joined a group of other secretaries of state urging the Supreme Court to make a determination in this case. So how would the ruling impact what's going on in Kansas? And also, what's your take on this? Would Trump have to be convicted of a criminal offense to be excluded from the ballot? Some may disagree with this.
Yeah, the 14th Amendment came out of the end of the Civil War. They didn't want anybody who served the Confederacy to be elected into U.S. government. What's odd is the Congress reinstated some ability of the rebels to be able to run for office, but they were never convicted. So that was Colorado argument. I don't know if you need to be convicted or not, but I do think the court should chime in. I was on a podcast with Secretary Fontes out of Arizona, and he said, well, maybe we should. And I said, no, I wasn't. That's not what the people elected me to do. He goes, I would say they do. I said, no, they elect me to put names on the ballot, not take them off. And so I would, if we want the court to say, tell us what to do, because I don't want to. Let's say I have one county clerk that says, well, I just think we can pull a name off the ballot. Now his name's on 104 instead of 105 counties. This is not arbitrary authority you want election officials to have. There should be a process. In Kansas, if someone runs for U.S. Senate, but they're only 13 below the constitutional age, the State Board of Canvassers determine whether or not that person will qualify for the ballot. We'll say no, but then it can be challenged by the State Board of Canvassers. This happens almost every major election year. We had somebody who lived, if you remember, I can't remember his name, he had a boot on his head and he was running for Attorney General, which was absolutely absurd. And no, you can't be on the ballot because you didn't even live in Kansas, you're from New York. But just for me to say under the 14th Amendment, I'm ripping names off, what if I have a county that says, okay, then I'm pulling Joe Biden's name off? I mean, there's no measurables. So that's basically what was in the opinion that we agreed on. And we all made sure that this can't sound like it's a Republican a conservative push. It's got to have logic to it. We tried to get some Democrats on it, but politically there were some nuances there. We respect that. But hopefully the court will hear us and we can go and get a decision that we don't have that authority.
Okay, and the significance of them making that determination for Kansas, what would you say would happen in either case?
Well, I mean, there's going to be a lot of people upset if you say you can't put his name on there, especially if he hasn't been convicted of anything. My biggest concern that would happen, not just Kansas, but in the Congress, is let's say he wins the primary, which is, we don't know yet, and he is the nominee, and then he beats the sitting president, and then he's convicted. Now, does the Democrat Party in Congress say, okay, we're not going to recognize your electors and we're going to appoint new electors, like the Republicans tried to do in 2020? We're in a very precarious situation as secretaries to just play it straight down the line.
Okay. Now, when we spoke in May last year, we did touch on some claims about election security in Kansas and people raising questions about whether elections are completely secure. Those conversations still taking place at the State House in some hearings. But you mentioned that language, which includes conversations about voter fraud for Republicans or conversations about voter suppression for Democrats, could play a huge role in determining turnout for these elections we see. So you said your hope for 2024 is that it goes away. Are you still hearing about this now? And what sort of impact is it having on local officials, you'd say?
Well, you know, we've had local election officials threatened. Okay, if you're going to do voter fraud, you're not going to try to capture a county of 5,000 people. It's just ridiculous. That's not where you're going to do the fraud at, right? Especially in a presidential election or in the value them both, which was a statewide vote by the people. And they're your neighbors. They're not cheaters. Clerks are not cheaters. They make administrative errors sometimes because, you know, what pulls off an election is volunteers. And sometimes volunteers make mistakes. Rarely do you go to school to study to get a doctorate in elections. It's just outside of Auburn, I don't know any other university that provides such a curriculum. So, but then I do believe, depending on certain election results, because Stacey Abrams in Georgia was saying it was voter suppression, and then of course Donald Trump was saying it was voter fraud, and it just tells your base, well, my vote doesn't matter, why try? Value them both lost by 18%. Our polling says if you talk voter suppression, Democrat turnout drops off about 12 to 18%. If you talk voter fraud, Republican turnout drops 12 to 18%. It lost by 18%. And what was the biggest conversation? My primary opponent accusing us of a coordinated voter fraud. So it was everywhere. So if you just constantly bash the institution of elections, it's going to hurt the people that are trying to win.
Gotcha. And it's just discouraging, you would say.
It does. It doesn't motivate you. You know, it should be I got to vote with my son for the first time when he was 18. And it's such a cool thing. I mean, to see my son vote for me, you know, and he did. I watched. I was looking over like, you better not miss as well. But voting is supposed to be an exciting thing. It's not supposed to be a scary thing. Whether you're concerned about your life or if you got just concerns like, well, I'm going to go there and they're just going to suppress my vote. That's not what is truth. And we don't want people having those emotions when they go and vote. We want it to be a positive experience.
Gotcha. And when it comes to legislation that's coming up at the State House, for example, pushes to change advanced voting deadlines or to ban ranked choice voting, something that I'm not sure if we really have that procedure.
It's already banned in the Constitution.
Okay. So how do you feel about the legislation in itself? If the stance is that Kansas elections are secure, for example, do bills that claim to push for enhanced election security counter that opinion or challenge it? What's your take on that?
I was a legislator for about 18 years, and sometimes you just want to say you're doing something so you can go back to your constituency and say, well, I introduced a bill to do X, and often there's no intention to advance that. Some people do try to advance it, and they don't realize. I was in committee and Senator Thompson said, can we make advance mail ballots only for elderly and para and quadriplegics? I'm like, oh, okay, but there's other disabled. You want to turn the ICD-9 code book into statute and pick which ones can do it. It's easier to just say no. If you want to vote by mail, you can. And we've been doing it since the 90s. But his concern is fraud with mail ballots. And but hey, go be a poll worker. Go see the process. As legislators, if you're an elected individual, you can be a poll worker, just not in an area where your name's on the ballot. So, and every time they do it, they end up coming back saying, you know what, there's some administrative errors that we can, you know, we're losing tenured people. But so that sometimes creates an error, but they realize how secure elections really are.
All right, and I also understand your office has made an election security announcement recently, designating nearly $2 million to strengthen election security.
Yeah, and so this isn't necessarily election day security. We have hired an auditor to do kind of a process audit of the counties, like how do you secure your equipment? How do you program your equipment? We found out a lot of this equipment was just in with their closet with the pens and paper, and everybody's going in and out of that. Well, that's not secure for the equipment. The last thing we want is someone stealing some vote equipment, breaking it apart, taking pictures and publishing it on the internet, and that China would love that. So we want to make sure that they have what's necessary to secure it. And some of these counties just don't have the money to do it. So we're like, okay, tell us what you need, and we'll use our HAVA money to secure it. So, and it helps those election workers, because then they can go tell, those county clerks can tell their folks, hey, we took a grant and we've secured our equipment. And it just increases confidence, and it doesn't affect voters. It doesn't make it harder for anybody to vote. It's still just as easy to vote today as it was last year.
All right, Secretary Schwab, thank you so much. We'll be right back. You're watching Inside Kansas Politics.
At K-State Credit Union, we're your trusted neighbor. We understand life can be expensive. Our team members are here to help you consolidate debt, save for a dream vacation, or buy your first home. Experience the difference of a credit union. Visit kstatecu.com to get started.
Join today.
Huge savings on all our top brands going on now at Vanderbilt's. New, lightweight and slip-resistant Volcom Chill safety shoes, $84.99. Durable full-grain leather new Cat Striker boots, $74.99. Save big on Wolverine Rancher boots. Your choice, $99.99. Waterproof Carolina neoprene boots, $89.99.
What boots and Vanderbilt.
Winter's first snowfall. It's a magical time. The kids are dressed and ready to play. In the living room. Those leaky vinyl windows were a great deal, though. At Renewal by Andersen, every replacement window we install is custom-sized and precision manufactured to fit your home. That means a perfect fit every time. Kick those cheap, leaky windows to the curb. Visit our website to claim this month's great offer and schedule your free consultation.
At the Mattress Hub, we believe that healthy sleep has the power to change the way you live. During our tax time savings event, find up to 50% off on the best brands in sleep, including Sealy mattresses starting at $299. Sleep well and save big. Only at the Mattress Hub.
Start with a bang.
Invite a bunch of friends, then fill the infield like a rock concert. Mix in some superstar power and turn them loose. A 500-mile all-out fight for NASCAR's biggest prize. That's the Great American Race. The Daytona 500, today at 2:30 Eastern on Fox.
Welcome back to Inside Kansas Politics. I'm Rebecca Chung. We're wrapping up our talk with Kansas Secretary of State Scott Schwab. Now, Secretary Schwab, let's shift to the next steps for your office. How are you preparing for the presidential election year, and what's your office focusing on right now?
Right now that we've got those grants out there and securing equipment and processes, we're training. We have some new clerks, so we are making sure they understand this is not as simple as a municipal election. This one's a little bit more complicated. Once we get through the presidential preference primary, we're also going to continue our push for more poll workers. We're losing a lot of tenured poll workers, and you lose institutional knowledge with that. The nice thing in Kansas, you could be as young as 16 to be a poll worker, and I'm encouraging those young folks, please do it. It looks great on a resume if you're looking for scholarships to go to college, or if you're trying to apply to a qualified admission school like Harvard or University of Michigan or something. This looks good. This is the type of stuff they want to see in your resume, and you help. You know, it's wonderful. We've heard anecdotal stories of grandparents working with their grandkids on election day at a poll. You know, we have elderly population that didn't grow up in the digital age. And then you have a 16-year-old that they've known nothing but the digital age. And we use technology to make sure our elections are secure and efficient. And so to partner together and have that 16-year-old go, no, you want to click here. Yeah, there you go. And they got their glass. Oh, thank you. You're so sweet. You know, it works great. So we're really preparing that education piece, and really this is our big push. We need poll workers, poll workers, poll workers.
Secretary Schwab, thank you again for speaking with us today. We really appreciate it. And that was your look inside Kansas politics. If you want to keep up to date on all things Kansas politics, then follow us on social media. Follow us on X at NKS Politics, and on Facebook, just search Inside Kansas Politics. We'll also post the full video on YouTube. Just search KSNT News. And check ksnt.com/inside-kansas-politics for past episodes. If you have a story you want Kansas state legislators to hear, or topics you think we should cover, let us know. You can email us at ikp@ksnt.com. We'll see you right here, same time, same place. Have a good day.